Imagine a country where ancient fortresses rise from bare rock 500 feet into the sky, where leopards prowl through cloud forests, and where massive stone Buddhas watch over civilizations that have thrived for over 2 millennia. Picture beaches where blue whales surface just beyond the waves, while tea plantations cascade down mountainsides like emerald staircases carved by giants. In Sri Lanka, this teardrop-shaped island suspended off the southern tip of India, beauty doesn't just exist in isolated pockets. It explodes from every corner, from the mist-shrouded peaks of the Central Highlands to the pristine coral reefs that guard its shores. This is a land where elephants roam through national parks larger than some European countries, where waterfalls plunge 300 feet through virgin rainforest, and where ancient irrigation systems still feed rice paddies after 15 centuries of continuous use. Here, Buddhist temples carved from solid granite stand beside Hindu covils painted in colors so vivid they seem to pulse with life. Colonial architecture tells stories of Portuguese, Dutch, and British occupation, while modern Sri Lankan culture weaves these influences into something entirely unique. Today we're taking you on a journey through 12 wonders that will redefine everything you thought you knew about natural beauty, human achievement, and the raw power of geography to shape civilizations. From the wildlife corridors where Asia's largest land mammals migrate seasonally, to the archaeological sites that predate Rome by centuries, each destination we'll explore represents the absolute pinnacle of what makes Sri Lanka one of Earth's most visually stunning and culturally rich nations. Prepare to witness wonders that will leave you questioning why this island isn't at the top of every traveler's bucket list. Number 12. Yala National Park. The morning mist clings to the scrubland as the first rays of sunlight pierce through the canopy, illuminating one of the most extraordinary wildlife spectacles on Earth. Yala National Park stretches across nearly 979 square kilometers of Sri Lanka's southeastern coast, where dry zone forests meet pristine beaches in a convergence that creates one of the highest leopard densities anywhere on the planet. This isn't just another safari destination. This is where nature has written one of its most dramatic stories across landscapes that shift from thorny acacia woodlands to lagoons where crocodiles bask in the morning sun. The park's Block 1 alone harbors over 30 Sri Lankan leopards, magnificent cats whose rosette-covered coats blend perfectly with the dappled shadows of the forest floor. Unlike their African and Asian cousins who must compete with lions and tigers, Sri Lanka's leopards reign supreme as the island's apex predator. Here they've evolved into larger, more confident hunters, often seen lounging in broad daylight across granite outcroppings or padding silently along beaches where their tracks mingle with those of nesting sea turtles. But Yala's magic extends far beyond its famous cats. Over 215 bird species call this wilderness home, from the stately painted stork to the endemic Sri Lankan jungle fowl, whose brilliant plumage inspired the country's national bird designation. Massive Asian elephants emerge from the forest in family groups, their ancient migration routes crisscrossing the park's varied ecosystems. Sloth bears with their distinctive white chest patches lumber through the underbrush searching for termite mounds, while spotted deer graze in clearings where peacocks display their iridescent tail feathers in elaborate courtship rituals. The park's diverse landscapes tell the story of geological forces that shaped this island over millions of years. Rocky outcrops rise from grasslands like ancient monuments, their surfaces carved by wind and rain into natural sculptures. Seasonal lakes fill and empty with the monsoons, creating temporary wetlands that attract thousands of migratory birds. Along the coast, pristine beaches stretch for kilometers, interrupted only by rocky headlands where waves crash against formations that have stood since the pre-Cambrian era. What makes Yala truly remarkable is how it represents Sri Lanka's commitment to conservation in a densely populated island nation. Despite pressure from development and agriculture, this protected wilderness provides critical habitat for species found nowhere else on Earth. The park's successful leopard population proves that with proper management, even apex predators can thrive alongside human communities, creating a model for wildlife conservation across South Asia. Number 11. Temple of the Tooth Relic, or Sri Dalada Maligawa. In the heart of Kandy, where the evening air fills with the scent of temple flowers and the rhythmic chanting of monks, stands one of Buddhism's most sacred sites. The Temple of the Tooth Relic, known locally as Sri Dalada Maligawa, houses what believers consider to be the Buddha's left canine tooth. a relic so revered that for over 16 centuries, its possession has legitimized the rule of Sri Lankan kings. This isn't merely a temple, it's the spiritual heart of a nation, where architecture, faith and political power converge in a complex of buildings that represents the pinnacle of Kandyan craftsmanship. The temple's exterior walls rise in layers of whitewashed stone and timber, their surfaces adorned with intricate wood carvings that tell stories from Buddhist mythology. Every beam, every pillar, every decorative element has been crafted by artisans whose skills have been passed down through generations. The main shrine, topped with a golden roof that catches the morning light like a beacon, sits surrounded by smaller buildings that serve various ceremonial functions. Octagonal towers called Pathirapua, unique to Kandyan architecture, provide elevated platforms where drummers and dancers perform during religious festivals. Inside, the temple reveals chambers within chambers, each more ornate than the last. The walls shimmer with silver and gold leaf, while painted panels depict scenes from the Jataka tales, stories of the Buddha's previous lives. The tooth relic itself rests in 7 nested golden caskets, each more elaborate than the last, protected by chambers that few outside the temple's highest-ranking monks ever see. The innermost casket, crafted from pure gold and encrusted with precious gems, represents centuries of devotional craftsmanship by Sri Lanka's most skilled artisans. The temple's significance extends far beyond its religious importance. For over 400 years it served as the spiritual center of the Kingdom of Kandy, the last independent Sinhalese kingdom to resist European colonization. The daily rituals performed here, 3 times each day, every day for centuries, connect modern Sri Lanka to an unbroken chain of Buddhist tradition that stretches back over 2 millennia. The morning, noon, and evening pujas involve elaborate ceremonies where monks chant ancient verses, while traditional drummers and dancers perform rituals that have remained virtually unchanged for generations. What makes this temple truly extraordinary is how it functions as a living piece of history. Unlike museum artifacts preserved under glass, the Temple of the Tooth Relic pulses with active spiritual life. Thousands of pilgrims arrive daily, bringing lotus flowers and lighting oil lamps in devotion. During the annual Esala Perahera festival, the temple becomes the focal point of one of Asia's most spectacular processions, as decorated elephants, traditional dancers, and fire performers parade through Kandy's streets in a celebration that transforms the entire city into a stage for cultural expression that predates most European civilizations. Number 10. Sigiriya Rock Fortress. 500 feet of sheer granite rises from the central plains like a geological monument to human ambition, its flat summit crowned with the ruins of what was once called the Eighth Wonder of the World. Sigiriya, known as Lion Rock, stands as perhaps the most audacious architectural achievement in Sri Lankan history, a 5th-century fortress palace that demonstrates how vision, engineering genius, and artistic mastery can transform even the most forbidding landscape into something honestly, just breathtakingly beautiful. King Kasyapa I chose this massive rock outcropping as the site for his capital in 477 CE, but what he created, well, it really transcended mere defensive necessity. The rock's vertical faces became canvases for some of the finest frescoes ever painted in South Asia. Images of celestial maidens whose vibrant colors have survived 15 centuries of monsoons and tropical heat. These Sigiriya damsels, as they're known today, showcase painting techniques so advanced that art historians still debate how such luminous pigments were created and applied to vertical rock faces hundreds of feet above the ground. The ascent to the summit reveals the full scope of Kasyapa's vision. Massive lion's paws, carved from the living rock, once flanked a stairway that passed through the mouth of a colossal lion's head. Though time has claimed most of the lion sculpture, these paws alone, each larger than a modern automobile, hint at the monument's original grandeur. The stairway between them leads through galleries where mirrors of polished metal once reflected light into the king's chambers, creating effects that must have seemed magical to 5th-century visitors. At the summit, the remains of Kasyapa's palace cover nearly 3 acres of carefully leveled granite. Foundations of royal chambers, audience halls, and private gardens reveal a complex designed not just for defense, but for comfortable living at unprecedented heights. Advanced hydraulic systems channeled rainwater into cisterns carved directly from the rock, ensuring the fortress could withstand lengthy sieges while maintaining the luxurious lifestyle befitting a royal court. Swimming pools cut from solid granite fed by these ancient water systems provided recreation for the king and his courtiers 500 feet above the surrounding countryside. The surrounding landscape was transformed into elaborate water gardens that demonstrate hydraulic engineering principles centuries ahead of their time. Symmetrical pools, fountain systems, and terraced gardens created a paradise at the base of the forbidding fortress. These gardens, fed by sophisticated irrigation channels that still function today, prove that Sigiriya was conceived not merely as a fortress, but as a complete urban environment where art, architecture, and landscape design merged into a unified masterpiece. The fortress represents something unique in world architecture, a monument where natural geology and human creativity achieved perfect synthesis. Unlike castles built on hills or palaces constructed on plains, Sigiriya required its builders to work with and around the rock's natural features, creating architecture that seems to grow organically from the stone itself. The result is a structure that appears both utterly natural and completely impossible, a reminder that human imagination can transform even the most challenging landscapes into expressions of beauty that endure across millennia. Number 9. Gali Fort. Where the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean meet the southwestern shores of Sri Lanka, a star-shaped fortress rises from the coastline like something from a European fairy tale transplanted to the tropics. Gali Fort represents 4.5 centuries of colonial architecture, but this UNESCO World Heritage Site transcends its historical origins to become something uniquely Sri Lankan, a living city where cobblestone streets echo with the sounds of modern life conducted within walls that have withstood countless monsoons, tsunamis, and the passage of empires. Built initially by the Portuguese in 1588 and expanded by the Dutch into its current form, Gali Fort demonstrates how European military architecture adapted to tropical conditions and local materials. The massive stone walls, some sections over 12 feet thick, incorporate coral limestone quarried from nearby reefs, creating structures that seem to glow with inner light when illuminated by the setting sun. 14 bastions project from these walls at strategic angles, each one designed according to the latest European theories of fortress construction, yet modified by local craftsmen who understood how to work with monsoon rains and coastal erosion. Walking through the fort's narrow streets feels like traveling through multiple centuries simultaneously. Dutch colonial mansions with their characteristic thick walls and red tile roofs stand beside British-era administrative buildings, while modern boutique hotels and art galleries occupy structures that once housed colonial administrators and merchant princes. The old Dutch Reformed Church, with its distinctive floor paved with tombstones of colonial officials, sits just blocks from the All Saints Anglican Church, whose construction tells the story of changing colonial powers through architectural details. The fort's true magic reveals itself at sunset, when the western walls become a promenade where locals and visitors gather to watch the sun disappear into the Indian Ocean. The ramparts, originally designed for defensive cannons, now serve as walkways where couples stroll hand in hand, while fishermen cast lines into waters that have supported human communities for over 2 millennia. Street vendors sell isowade, those shrimp fritters, and king coconuts, while traditional stilt fishermen work the shallow waters just beyond the fort walls, their silhouettes creating scenes that photographers dream of capturing. But Gali Fort is far more than a preserved historical site. It's a thriving community where families have lived for generations within the same walls their ancestors helped build. Modern Sri Lankan life unfolds in buildings that witness the arrival of Portuguese explorers, Dutch spice traders, and British colonial administrators. Children play cricket in courtyards where colonial governors once held court, while traditional craftsmen still work with techniques passed down through centuries of continuous occupation. The 2004 tsunami, which devastated much of Sri Lanka's southern coast, barely penetrated the fort's ancient defenses, proving that the Dutch engineers who designed these walls understood coastal dynamics with remarkable precision. The fort became a refuge for thousands of people during that disaster, fulfilling its protective function 4 centuries after its construction. Today, Gali Fort stands as testament to human adaptability, a place where historical preservation and modern life achieve perfect balance, creating one of the most photogenic and culturally rich urban environments in South Asia. Number 8. Polonnaruwa Ancient City. In the heart of Sri Lanka's north-central province, where rice paddies stretch to the horizon and ancient irrigation channels still carry water to modern farmers, lies Polonnaruwa, a city that served as the island's capital for over 3 centuries and honestly remains one of the most complete medieval urban complexes in South Asia. This isn't merely an archaeological site, It's a window into a sophisticated civilization that achieved architectural and engineering feats that rival anything built in medieval Europe, all while developing sustainable agricultural systems that continue to feed communities today. The city's most iconic structures emerge from manicured lawns like sculptures too perfect to be ancient. The Galvihara, a granite outcropping carved into 4 massive Buddha statues in the 12th century, represents the pinnacle of Sinhalese stone carving. The standing Buddha, nearly 23 feet tall, exhibits such perfect proportions and serene expression that visitors often fall silent upon first sight. The reclining Buddha, 46 feet from head to toe, captures the moment of the Buddha's final enlightenment with such artistic mastery that its creation seems to transcend human capability. These aren't just religious statues, they're masterpieces of medieval art that demonstrate technical skills lost to subsequent generations. The Royal Palace complex reveals the scope of Polonnaruwa's former glory. Foundation walls over 8 feet thick supported a 7-story structure that housed the royal court of King Parakramabahu I, whose 12th century reign marked the height of Sinhalese civilization. The audience hall, with its distinctive moonstone entrance and elephant head pillars, shows how Sinhalese architects developed unique decorative elements that distinguish their work from Indian or Southeast Asian contemporaries. Every carved element, from lotus pedestals to lion guardians, demonstrates attention to detail that rivals the great cathedrals of medieval Europe. Polonnaruwa's true genius appears in its water management systems. The Parakrama Samudra, a massive reservoir constructed by connecting and expanding several smaller lakes, covers over 5,600 acres and still supplies water to surrounding agricultural areas after 9 centuries. This artificial sea demonstrates engineering principles so advanced that honestly, modern hydrologists study its design to understand sustainable water management in tropical climates. The complex network of channels, sluices, and spillways that distribute this water across hundreds of square kilometers represents one of history's most sophisticated irrigation systems. The city's Buddhist monasteries showcase architectural innovation driven by tropical climate considerations. The Vadadaj, a circular relic house unique to Sri Lankan architecture, features concentric circles of stone pillars that once supported wooden roofs designed to protect sacred statues from monsoon rains while allowing natural ventilation. The Lotus Bath, an 8-petaled pool carved from granite, demonstrates how Sinhalese craftsmen incorporated symbolic religious elements into purely functional structures, creating architecture that serves both practical and spiritual purposes. What makes Polonnaruwa extraordinary is how completely it represents a civilization at its peak. Unlike sites where only temples or palaces survive, Polonnaruwa preserves residential areas, hospitals, educational institutions, and industrial facilities that reveal how medieval Sri Lankan society functioned as a complete urban system. The Alahana Piravena monastery complex includes libraries, meditation halls, and teaching facilities that house thousands of monks and students, creating one of South Asia's most important centers of Buddhist learning. Walking through these ruins isn't just viewing ancient architecture, it's experiencing the physical remains of a society that achieved remarkable synthesis between religious devotion, artistic achievement, and practical governance. Number 7. Horton Plains National Park and World's End. At 7,200 feet above sea level, where the central highlands of Sri Lanka meet the sky in a landscape that seems borrowed from the Scottish Highlands, Horton Plains National Park preserves one of the most unique ecosystems in tropical Asia. This cloud forest plateau, shrouded in mist for much of the year, supports plant and animal species found nowhere else on Earth, while its dramatic geography culminates in World's End, a precipice where the land simply stops, dropping 2,700 feet to the lowlands below in a view that has inspired wonder and vertigo for centuries. The park's montane grasslands roll across the plateau like a green carpet, interrupted by patches of stunted forest adapted to the harsh conditions of constant moisture and cool temperatures. These cloud forests, draped in moss and epiphytes, support over 750 species of plants, many endemic to this small area of highland Sri Lanka. The rhododendron arboreum, Sri Lanka's national flower, blooms here in brilliant red clusters that seem to glow against the mist-softened landscape. Giant tree ferns create cathedral-like groves where sambar deer graze in the early morning hours, their movements barely visible through the fog that clings to the forest floor. World's End itself defies easy description. The plateau simply ends, creating a cliff face that plunges nearly half a mile straight down to the tea plantations and jungle-covered foothills below. On clear mornings, before the afternoon mists roll in, the view encompasses much of southern Sri Lanka, from the coastal plains to the mountain peaks, with tea estates laid out in geometric patterns that speak to human efforts to cultivate even the most challenging landscapes. The southern coastline appears as a thin line where the land meets the ocean, over 60 miles away, but clearly visible in the mountain air. The park's wildlife has evolved in isolation, creating species found nowhere else on Earth. The Horton Plains' slender loris, one of the world's rarest primates, navigates the forest canopy with its enormous eyes adapted to life in the perpetually dim cloud forest. Endemic birds like the Sri Lankan whistling thrush and the dull blue flycatcher have developed unique songs that carry through the mist-muffled landscape. The park's streams, fed by monsoon rains and constant cloud moisture, support populations of rainbow trout introduced by British colonists but now naturalized to these highland waters. Baker's Falls, a 65-foot waterfall that cascades over granite rocks worn smooth by millennia of flowing water, demonstrates how even the park's water features differ from lowland waterfalls. Here, the water falls through air so saturated with moisture that the cascade seems to merge with the surrounding mist, creating ethereal effects that change throughout the day as light filters through the cloud cover. The pools below the falls maintain constant temperatures year-round, creating habitat for aquatic species adapted to the highland's stable but cool conditions. What makes Horton Plains truly remarkable is how it preserves a complete high-altitude ecosystem in a tropical island nation. This plateau represents the remnant of an ancient landscape that once covered much larger areas of Sri Lanka's central highlands. Climate change and human activity have reduced these montane grasslands to fragments, making Horton Plains one of the last intact examples of an ecosystem that once supported much more diverse highland fauna. The park serves as a living laboratory where scientists study how tropical mountain ecosystems respond to changing climate conditions, while visitors experience landscapes that seem impossible to find just degrees north of the equator. Number 6. Dambulla Cave Temple, also known as the Golden Temple. Carved into a massive granite outcropping that rises 160 meters above the surrounding plains, the Dambulla Cave Temple complex represents over 2 millennia of continuous Buddhist devotion expressed through some of the finest cave art in the ancient world. 5 separate caves, each transformed into elaborate shrines, contain over 150 Buddhist statues, and cover over 2,100 square meters of walls and ceilings, with paintings that chronicle the evolution of Sri Lankan religious art, from the 1st century BCE to the 18th century CE. This isn't just a temple, it's a gallery that preserves the artistic achievements of dozens of generations of monks, artists, and royal patrons who considered these caves sacred enough to devote their life's work to their decoration. The approach to the caves involves a steep climb up carved stone steps that wind around the rock face, offering increasingly spectacular views of the surrounding countryside. Rice paddies stretch to the horizon, interrupted by ancient reservoirs that still reflect the sky like mirrors embedded in the landscape. The climb itself becomes a pilgrimage, as each step reveals new perspectives on the agricultural systems that have sustained Sri Lankan civilization for over 2,000 years. Cave 1, known as the Temple of the King of the Gods, immediately establishes the complex's extraordinary artistic standards. A 47-foot reclining Buddha, carved from the living rock and covered in paint that has maintained its brilliance for centuries, dominates the cave's interior. The statue's serene expression and perfect proportions demonstrate mastery of human anatomy that rivals classical Greek sculpture, while the painting technique used to create the figure's robes involves layering colors in methods that modern conservators are still working to understand. Cave 2, the largest and most spectacular, contains over 150 statues and covers every available surface with paintings that tell the story of Buddha's life and previous incarnations. The ceiling, painted to resemble flowing fabric, creates the illusion that the cave interior exists within an enormous tent decorated with scenes from Buddhist mythology. Kings and queens from Sri Lankan history appear alongside gods and demons in compositions that blend religious instruction with historical documentation. The artistic techniques employed here, including the use of natural pigments that have retained their vibrancy in the cave's stable environment, represent knowledge systems that were passed down through generations of artist monks. The remaining caves each contribute unique elements to the complex's overall impact. Cave 3 contains statues dating from the 18th century that show how Sri Lankan Buddhist art evolved under various cultural influences while maintaining its distinctive character. Cave 4, the smallest, demonstrates how even limited space could be transformed into profound spiritual environments through careful proportioning and strategic placement of decorative elements. What elevates Dambulla beyond other cave temple complexes is how it functions as a complete artistic environment where architecture, sculpture, and painting work together to create immersive spiritual experiences. The cave's natural acoustics amplify the chanting of monks during daily ceremonies, while strategically placed oil lamps create lighting effects that make the painted figures seem to move and breathe. Modern visitors experience the same sensory environment that has inspired pilgrims for over 2 millennia, making Dambulla one of the few ancient sites where the original spiritual atmosphere remains intact and actively maintained through continuous religious practice. And just when you think it can't get better, wait until you see number 1. If this journey has already left you breathless, hit that subscribe button. We're only halfway through. In the pre-dawn darkness, streams of pilgrims carrying flickering oil lamps wind up the mountain paths like rivers of light. Their destination, a 7,359-foot summit that holds significance for 4 major world religions. Adam's Peak, known locally as Sri Pada, or Sacred Footprint, rises from Sri Lanka's central highlands in a perfect pyramid that dominates the landscape for miles in every direction. At its summit, a depression in the rock measuring 5 feet 7 inches long has inspired centuries of pilgrimage and devotion, claimed by Buddhists as the footprint of Buddha, by Hindus as that of Shiva, by Muslims as Adam's first step on earth, and by Christians as the mark left by St. Thomas. The pilgrimage season from December to May transforms the mountain into one of the world's most spectacular displays of mass devotion. Over 500,000 pilgrims annually make the ascent, following stone steps that have been worn smooth by centuries of bare feet and sandaled soles. The night climb, time to reach the summit for sunrise, creates an experience that transcends individual religious beliefs. Tens of thousands of people, united in a common goal, supporting each other through the physical challenge of gaining over 4,000 feet of elevation in just a few hours. The trail itself tells the story of human determination overcoming geographical impossibility. Stone steps, some sections dating back over 1,000 years, snake up gradients that would challenge modern mountain climbers. Rest stations built into the mountainside provide shelter and refreshment, many maintained by families who have served pilgrims for generations as expressions of religious devotion. The infrastructure required to support this massive annual pilgrimage, from the stone steps to the rest houses to the communication systems that coordinate the flow of climbers, represents one of the most sophisticated logistical achievements in the ancient world. The summit sunrise reveals why this mountain has inspired reverence across cultures and centuries. The peak's shadow, projected onto the clouds and mist below, creates a perfect triangular silhouette that appears to float in mid-air, a phenomenon that occurs nowhere else on Earth with such clarity and consistency. This shadow, visible for only a few minutes each morning during the clear season, seems to transform the mountain into a geometric monument suspended between earth and sky. The sight has inspired countless legends and continues to move even skeptical visitors to tears. The mountain sits at the center of one of Sri Lanka's most biodiverse regions where, interestingly, 4 different climate zones converge. The lower slopes support tropical rainforest that harbors species found nowhere else on Earth, while the upper reaches preserve montane cloud forest ecosystems. The Peak Wilderness Sanctuary, which surrounds the mountain, protects watersheds that supply water to much of southern Sri Lanka, making this sacred mountain essential to the island's ecological health. The pilgrimage route passes through landscapes that showcase Sri Lanka's geographical diversity and microcosm. Tropical fruit trees give way to temperate forests, which transform into alpine meadows near the summit. Tea plantations carved into the mountain slopes create geometric patterns that complement the natural contours of the land. Villages that exist primarily to serve pilgrims demonstrate how religious tourism can sustain mountain communities across centuries, creating economic systems based on spiritual rather than material wealth. What makes Adam's Peak truly extraordinary is how it functions simultaneously as a natural wonder, religious site, and engineering achievement. The mountain's perfect pyramid shape seems, honestly, almost too geometrically precise to be natural, yet geological surveys confirm it's entirely the product of natural erosion patterns. The convergence of multiple religious traditions at a single site creates an atmosphere of tolerance and shared devotion rarely found elsewhere. And the logistics of managing hundreds of thousands of annual pilgrims on a mountain trail demonstrates organizational capabilities that many modern institutions would struggle to match. Where the central highlands of Sri Lanka meet the lowland plains, the landscape performs a geological ballet that culminates in two of the island's most photographed landmarks. Ella Rock, rising 3,438 feet above sea level, provides a natural viewing platform that overlooks tea country, cloud forest, and distant plains in a panorama that captures the full diversity of Sri Lankan geography. Just below, the nine-arch bridge spans a valley in a curve of stone arches that represents the pinnacle of colonial railway engineering, creating a structure so perfectly proportioned and dramatically situated that it seems designed more for beauty than mere transportation. The hike to Ella Rock begins in the town of Ella, itself a collection of guest houses and restaurants that cater to travelers drawn by the region's spectacular mountain scenery. The trail winds through tea plantations where workers still handpick leaves as their grandparents did, their movements creating patterns of color against the perfectly maintained rows of tea bushes. These plantations, established by British colonists in the 19th century, transformed Sri Lanka's Central Highlands into one of the world's most visually striking agricultural landscapes, where every hillside becomes a work of land art maintained through daily human labor. The ascent reveals ecosystems layered by elevation and exposure. Lower slopes support lush tropical vegetation where jackfruit and mango trees provide shade for tea workers' homes. As the trail climbs, temperate plants appear, rhododendrons and wild orchids that bloom in brilliant colors against the mountain mist. Near the summit, the vegetation becomes sparse and hardy, adapted to the constant winds and dramatic temperature fluctuations that characterize Sri Lankan mountain peaks. From the summit of Ella Rock, the view, honestly, is just breathtaking. It brings together multiple climate zones and geographical regions in a single sweeping panorama. The Ella Gap, which is this natural split in the mountain range, frames a view that, on a really clear day, stretches all the way to the southern coast, which is more than 40 miles away. Sometimes you can spot the Indian Ocean as just a thin blue line right at the horizon, while closer in, you see these intricate patterns, rice paddies, tea estates, and small towns, all connected by winding roads that seem to snake through terrain you'd think was impossible to cross. There's this striking contrast between the neat geometric shapes of human agriculture and the wild, chaotic beauty of the natural forest, and the whole scene shifts and changes as the light moves across it throughout the day. The nine-arch bridge, which you can spot from several points along the Ella Rock Trail, really stands out as one of the most remarkable feats of engineering from Sri Lanka's colonial railway era. It was built entirely without steel during World War I, back when materials were super scarce, and it spans 300 feet across a valley using only stone, brick, and cement. Its 9 arches form this graceful curve that follows the natural shape of the valley, but still keeps the exact gradients needed for the railway to run smoothly. The proportions of the bridge, each arch spaced and sized just right, show how functional engineering can actually become a form of art, especially when it's crafted by people who really understood both the technical and the aesthetic sides of things. The railway line itself, which still carries passengers from Colombo all the way to Badulla, passes through some of the most spectacular mountain scenery you'll find anywhere in South Asia. The train ride to Ella has kind of become legendary among travelers, offering views of tea plantations, cloud forests, and mountain valleys that honestly rival anything you'd see in the Swiss Alps. Building this railway through such tough terrain that would challenge even today's construction equipment, was one of the British Empire's boldest infrastructure projects. It was completed mostly by hand, with workers moving millions of tons of earth and stone using just simple tools, and yet, the system they built is still running strong after more than a century. What really sets Ella Rock and the Nine-Arch Bridge apart is the way they show the relationship between natural beauty and human engineering at its absolute best. The rock serves as this natural viewing platform, letting you take in landscapes that have been shaped by thousands of years of agricultural development. At the same time, the bridge is proof that transportation infrastructure can actually enhance, rather than take away from, scenic beauty, when it's designed with real care for the environment and a deep sense of aesthetic principles. Number 3. Knuckles Mountain Range. Rising from the Central Highlands like the knuckles of a giant's fist thrust skyward, The Knuckles mountain range represents Sri Lanka's last great wilderness, a 155 square kilometer conservation area where cloud forests, montane grasslands and ancient rock formations create ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. Named by British surveyors for its resemblance to a clenched fist when viewed from certain angles, this UNESCO World Heritage Site preserves habitats that support over half of Sri Lanka's endemic vertebrate species in an area smaller than most major cities. The range's 5 main peaks, each rising above 6,000 feet, create a series of microclimates that compress Sri Lanka's full range of ecological zones into a relatively small area. Mini World's End, a dramatic precipice that rivals its more famous counterpart in Horton Plains, drops over 1,000 feet to the valley below, while providing views across the entire Central Highlands. The cliff face itself supports rare endemic plants that have evolved to survive on vertical rock surfaces, constantly moistened by cloud moisture and occasional waterfalls. The Knuckles Trail System, originally created by indigenous Vedda people and later expanded by British tea planters, winds through landscapes that change dramatically with elevation and exposure. Lower valleys support dense tropical rainforest where giant tree ferns create cathedral-like spaces beneath towering hardwood trees. As trails climb toward the peaks, the forest gives way to temperate cloud forest draped in moss and epiphytes, where the air stays cool and humid even during Sri Lanka's dry season. The range's endemic species list reads like a catalog of evolutionary uniqueness. The Knuckles pygmy lizard found only in these mountains represents one of the smallest reptile species in Asia. Endemic frogs with brilliant warning coloration inhabit stream beds that flow year-round due to the constant cloud moisture. The Knuckles spiny lizard, discovered only in recent decades, demonstrates how these isolated peaks continue to yield new species to scientific exploration. Over 130 bird species, including several endemics, make the range one of Sri Lanka's most important birdwatching destinations. The geological complexity of the Knuckles reveals Sri Lanka's ancient history written in stone. Pre-Cambrian rock formations, some over 1.8 billion years old, create the range's dramatic peaks and cliff faces. These rocks, among the oldest exposed formations on Earth, contain mineral compositions that create unique soil chemistry supporting plant communities adapted to specific geological conditions. The interaction between ancient geology and tropical climate has created habitat diversity that scientists are still working to catalog and understand. Traditional villages scattered throughout the Knuckles foothills demonstrate sustainable mountain agriculture practiced for centuries, without degrading the forest ecosystems. Rice paddies carved into impossible slopes create stepped landscapes that seem to defy gravity, while traditional water management systems channel monsoon runoff into irrigation networks that support both agricultural and forest communities. These village systems prove that human habitation can coexist with biodiversity conservation when traditional knowledge guides land use decisions. The range's weather patterns create daily spectacles that vary dramatically with season and elevation. Morning mists rise from valleys to engulf peaks in clouds that part and reform throughout the day, creating constantly changing views and photography opportunities. During monsoon season, waterfalls appear overnight on cliff faces, cascading hundreds of feet before disappearing into the forest canopy. The interplay between sunlight, mist, and forest creates lighting conditions that seem designed for landscape photography. What makes the Knuckles mountain range truly extraordinary is how it preserves Sri Lanka's evolutionary laboratory in its most pristine condition. Unlike other mountain ranges that have been extensively modified by tea cultivation or development, the Knuckles maintains complete forest cover from base to summit, providing uninterrupted habitat corridors that support natural ecological processes. The range serves as a genetic reservoir for species that have been eliminated from more accessible mountain areas, making it essential for Sri Lanka's long-term biodiversity conservation strategy. Where Sri Lanka's southern coast curves into a perfect crescent of golden sand backed by coconut palms, Marissa Beach offers more than just a tropical paradise. It provides front-row seats to one of nature's most spectacular performances. Just beyond the reef where waves break in perfect formation for surfers, the continental shelf drops into depths where blue whales, the largest animals ever to exist on Earth, surface to breathe in waters that support one of the planet's most diverse marine ecosystems. The beach itself embodies everything visitors imagine when they picture tropical perfection. 2 kilometers of fine golden sand curve between rocky headlands where coconut palms lean at impossible angles toward the turquoise water. Traditional outrigger fishing boats, painted in bright colors and decorated with eyes to ward off evil spirits, rest on sand that's been swept clean by twice-daily tides. The water temperature rarely varies from a perfect 81 degrees Fahrenheit, while gentle waves provide ideal conditions for swimming, surfing, and simply floating in water so clear you can see your feet even in chest-deep water. But Marissa's true magic begins where the shallow coastal waters meet the deep ocean. The continental shelf drops dramatically just a few kilometers offshore, creating upwelling currents that bring nutrient-rich deep water to the surface. This phenomenon supports massive populations of krill and small fish that attract blue whales, sperm whales, and dolphins in numbers that make Sri Lanka's southern coast one of the world's most reliable whale-watching destinations. Between November and April, blue whales, animals that can reach 100 feet in length and weigh as much as 30 elephants, surface regularly in waters visible from the beach. The whale-watching experience from Marissa begins before dawn, as boats loaded with eager visitors motor out into waters that transition from turquoise to deep blue as the depth increases. The anticipation builds as captains, many of whom learned these waters from their fathers and grandfathers, scan the horizon for the distinctive spouts that indicate whale presence. When a blue whale surfaces, an event that never loses its power to inspire awe, the ocean transforms from empty seascape to stage for one of nature's most humbling performances. Blue whales surface in a sequence that reveals their impossible size gradually. First, a massive head breaks the water, followed by seemingly endless lengths of blue-gray back that can take 30 seconds to fully appear. The whale's breathing, a spout that can reach 30 feet into the air, sounds like a steam engine and can be heard from over a mile away. When these giants dive, their tail flukes, spanning up to 25 feet, rise completely out of the water in movements so graceful they seem choreographed despite the animal's massive size. The waters around Marissa support not just blue whales, but an entire marine ecosystem that includes sperm whales, pilot whales, and several dolphin species. Spinner dolphins, known for their acrobatic displays, often approach boats in pods of hundreds, leaping and spinning in performances that can last for hours. The interaction between these marine mammals and their environment demonstrates ecological relationships that have persisted for millions of years, largely undisturbed by human activity until recent decades. The economic transformation of Marissa from a quiet fishing village to an international whale-watching destination illustrates how sustainable tourism can provide alternatives to exploiting natural resources. Former fishermen now captain whale-watching boats, using their intimate knowledge of local waters and marine life to provide visitors with experiences that create economic incentives for conservation. The community has developed strict guidelines for whale watching that minimize disturbance to marine mammals while providing livelihoods for hundreds of local families. In the north-central plains of Sri Lanka, where ancient roads converge beneath sacred trees that have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, stands Anuradhapura, not merely the island's first capital, but one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world and the birthplace of Theravada Buddhism as we know it today. For over 1,400 years, from the 4th century BCE to the 10th century CE, this sacred city served as the political and spiritual heart of Sri Lankan civilization, growing into a metropolis that rivaled Rome in size and sophistication, while developing architectural and engineering achievements that continue to inspire wonder in modern visitors. The city's most sacred site, the Sri Mahabodhi, represents living history in its most literal form. This fig tree, grown from a cutting of the original Bodhi tree under which Buddha achieved enlightenment, was planted in 288 BCE and stands today as the oldest historically documented tree in the world. For over 2,300 years, this tree has been continuously tended by Buddhist monks, surviving droughts, invasions, and the passage of empires through devotional care that makes it not just a religious symbol, but a testament to human dedication spanning over 90 generations. The dagobas of Anuradhapura rise from the ancient cityscape like white mountains constructed by human hands. Ruan Welisaya, built by King Dutugamunu in the 2nd century BCE, stands 300 feet tall and required an estimated 93 million bricks in its construction, a project that employed thousands of workers for over a decade. The dome's perfect hemisphere, painted brilliant white and topped with a crystal-studded spire, creates a landmark visible for miles across the flat plains. The mathematical precision required to construct such massive domes without modern engineering tools demonstrates advanced knowledge of geometry and physics that challenges assumptions about ancient technological capabilities. Jetavanaramaya, the world's tallest brick structure for over 1,000 years, originally rose over 400 feet into the sky, taller than the Statue of Liberty, and constructed entirely from millions of handmade bricks. The Dagoba's base covers over 8 acres, while its construction required not just massive labor forces, but sophisticated logistics to transport materials from across the island. Archaeological excavations around its foundation have revealed monastic complexes that house thousands of monks, complete with libraries, hospitals, and teaching facilities that made Anuradhapura one of Buddhism's most important educational centers. The city's hydraulic engineering achievements created the foundation for a civilization that supported over 1 million inhabitants in an area larger than modern Manhattan. The Basawakulama tank, constructed in the 4th century BCE, still supplies water to modern Anuradhapura after over 2,300 years of continuous use. The Tisa Wewa, a reservoir covering over 550 acres, demonstrates understanding of watershed management and hydraulic principles that wouldn't be matched in Europe for another millennium. These ancient irrigation systems created agricultural surpluses that supported not just the city's massive population, but also funded the construction projects that transformed Anuradhapura into one of the ancient world's architectural marvels. The archaeological museum and the ruins scattered throughout the sacred precinct reveal daily life in a city that functioned as the center of a sophisticated civilization. Hospitals with advanced drainage systems, universities with residential quarters for students from across Asia, and industrial areas where craftsmen produced goods for trade networks extending from Rome to China, all demonstrate that Anuradhapura was far more than just a religious center. The city served as the hub of an island-wide civilization that achieved remarkable synthesis between spiritual devotion, artistic achievement, and practical governance. The Abhayagiri Monastery complex, covering over 500 acres, once housed 5,000 monks and served as a university that attracted scholars from across the Buddhist world. The complex included libraries that preserved palm leaf manuscripts from all over Asia, making Anuradhapura a repository of human knowledge that, honestly, rivals the Library of Alexandria in its historical significance. The ruins of lecture halls, meditation chambers, and residential buildings reveal an educational infrastructure designed to support advanced scholarship in philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and literature. What makes Anuradhapura truly extraordinary is how it represents the complete flowering of an indigenous civilization that achieved greatness through peaceful means rather than military conquest. Unlike other ancient capitals built through imperial expansion, Anuradhapura grew through trade, scholarship, and religious devotion, creating wealth through agricultural innovation, and attracting international respect through cultural achievement. The city's ruins, demonstrate that human societies can reach remarkable heights when guided by principles of learning, tolerance, and sustainable resource management. The sacred city continues to function as a living pilgrimage site where modern Sri Lankans connect with their cultural origins through religious practices that have continued unbroken for over 2 millennia. During full moon days, thousands of white-clad pilgrims walk ancient paths between dagobas that still inspire the same reverence they generated in the time of ancient kings. This continuity between past and present makes Anuradhapura unique among World Heritage Sites, a place where ancient architecture serves its original spiritual purpose, while revealing the achievements of a civilization that created one of humanity's most enduring cultural legacies. Standing among these ancient monuments, watching modern pilgrims perform rituals beneath trees that sheltered their ancestors over 70 generations ago, visitors experience something beyond tourism or historical education. They witness the power of human devotion to create permanence in a world of constant change, and the ability of great architecture to connect people across millennia through shared experiences of wonder, reverence, and aspiration for something greater than individual existence. This journey through Sri Lanka's 12 greatest wonders reveals a country that, honestly, just defies every expectation about what a small island nation can contain. From the cloud forests of the Knuckles Mountains to the whale-rich waters off Marissa, and from ancient capitals that rivaled Rome to modern conservation successes that protect some of Earth's rarest species, Sri Lanka compresses the full spectrum of natural beauty and human achievement into an area smaller than Ireland. Each wonder we've explored represents not just a destination, but really a testament to the power of geography, history, and human creativity to create experiences that transform everyone who encounters them. What emerges from this exploration is a portrait of a country where, every landscape tells multiple stories simultaneously. The same mountains that shelter endemic species also preserve the watersheds that have sustained civilizations for over 2 millennia. The beaches that provide perfect tropical paradise also serve as launching points for encounters with the largest animals ever to exist on Earth. The ancient cities that demonstrate remarkable engineering achievements continue to function as active religious sites, where modern pilgrims connect with traditions that predate most world religions. Sri Lanka's true magic lies not in any single wonder, but in how these diverse landscapes and cultural achievements combine to create a national identity rooted in both natural beauty and human wisdom. This is a country where Buddhist principles of compassion and environmental stewardship have shaped land use policies for over 2,000 years, creating a model for sustainable civilization that remains relevant in our current environmental crisis. The ancient irrigation system still feeding modern rice paddies, the protected forests still harboring species found nowhere else on Earth, and the religious traditions still guiding daily life across rural communities all demonstrate possibilities for human societies to achieve prosperity while maintaining harmony with natural systems. The visual richness we've explored, from the golden light on ancient dagobas to the morning mist rising from tea plantations from the prehistoric rock art of Sigiriya, to the geometric precision of colonial architecture, represents something deeper than mere scenic beauty. These landscapes embody the human capacity to find meaning and create lasting value through respectful interaction with natural environments. Sri Lanka shows us what becomes possible when civilizations develop in response to local conditions rather than in opposition to them, creating cultures that enhance rather than diminish the beauty of their natural settings. If this journey amazed you, subscribe and share it with someone who loves discovery. Some places you visit, others stay with you forever. Until the next destination, stay curious.